it's Joyce Conroy. You are on Ernie's Corner, the block party. Ernie, lots of times I think I should practice saying arg because I feel like I'm always discovering buried treasure when you make a suggestion about the designs. And the beauty of it is our block party family also gets to discover, like today, John Hurley delivers one more hallelujah. And we're also going to talk about, what is it, Golden Avatar?
Yeah.
Just fantastic.
Golden Avatar is the Hare Krishnas. So you talk about, I've talked about the diversity of what I've worked in, and you'd be hard to name an industry that I haven't done something in. I mean, how many people do you know that does advertising for the Hare Krishnas?
Not many.
And it's a very interesting story, but let's back up again for a second here and talk about the reason these angels are behind me is because that's kind of what started it all. And when I got the opportunity to work on these angels, I was very much into gospel music. It just had a way. Even as a kid, I lived near a black church, probably a couple blocks away, and we would go. I remember being a kid, and we would go and sit on the fence outside the windows, and they're open, and the music, because most of their services were all singing, and it was just beautiful, and it always kind of resonated with me. And you and I talked about this before. Swan Silvertone changed my life, along with a guy named King Sunny Ade. And both those influences, along with being a kid and listening to gospel music firsthand, and then getting Jesus Christ Superstar, it was amazing. So that happened in 1970, cut to 6 years later, and there's an opportunity that we talked about before. How about one of our biggest competitors at Pacific Pioneer was the record company's art departments. That was true with most of the majors, but then there were these independent, smaller labels like Neighborhood and Alive and Bell Records. And the creative director at Bell Records really, I think she had a crush on my partner, Tony, because he was really good looking. And he was head of sales at Craig Braun, and he serviced Bell Records. And so, in the creative business, you sort of go with every angle you can
It's
find.
all right.
Yeah, to be in your favor, right?
Yeah.
So I we continued getting work here and there from her name was Beverly Weinstein, and she was the creative director there at Bell Records. She was involved with the Godspell album. She was working on that, and Bell Records put that out after Jesus Christ Superstar. And I think that there were a couple of reasons why she came to us with this album. One was the fact that I had done Jesus Christ Superstar. So again, connecting the dots from there to there, and it's like 6 years later. But she was really, because of Godspell and her crush on my partner Tony, and the fact that we've done a few things for her, she came to us with this album for John Hurley. And I had never really heard of him, quite honestly. And I got a chance to talk to him in the recording studio. She was in the recording studio with him, and they were working on the album. And his voice was amazing. It was very raspy. So it had this kind of guttural kind of thing to it, but it was smooth in a way. I mean, it was so interesting. And when you get these people that try and define the kind of music that it was all about, it was funky rock, infused with gospel that's soul based out of Memphis. I mean, it's got all those great ingredients. It's like this album was like making a gourmet dinner. Every piece of it was, from the musicians to the producer to John himself. I mean, and what a really nice guy. I mean, he was really open and very humble, but an incredible, like you said, songwriter and a musician and all the rest of it. And he put together this album. And I think the other part of the reason why Beverly came to us was because there was really no budget for it. There was no photographs for it. And let me put that up while we're talking here.
I remember looking at it online and I kept thinking, well, because I was expecting to see a picture.
Yeah, right. And well, there was no pictures,
No.
there was no time, there was no budget, you
Oh,
know. And Beverly, you could, she was kind of, you could hear it in her voice. She wanted to make sure that she really loved this album and what they were doing. She really believed in it, and she believed in us. And so I think putting the two things together, and we're again constantly trying to work every angle we can to get work. I mean, when you're a small company and you're out there, I mean, it gets scary sometimes, but we were always blessed in the fact that after the first year or so, we would Tony wouldn't really have to go out and sell that much. People would be coming to us. People would be calling. We would come into the office, turn on the lights, turn on the coffee machine, put on the music, and the phone would start ringing. And it got more and more like that, and especially when we crossed over and was doing corporate work as well. So we were getting work from both angles, but we still wanted every project we could get. Never wanted to say, I never imagined myself saying no to any work at all whatsoever. And I would take chicken poop and make chicken salad out of it. And that was really the gig. And not so much this album, because this album, I really loved the music. I loved him. And again, Beverly was very good to us. She was very willing to work with us, which we wanted to nurture. And so when we did this album, and there was really no time, I had to do something really simple and quick. So my first, as always, my first fallback is the lettering. I do lettering, do branding. And let me move out of the way here. And so and it seemed to be the quickest way to get something done. Plain brown package, almost like a craft paper package, very simple, very clean. And there was a kid that was hanging out at Pacific Ioneer. And we'd get them from time to time, and they would come and they would watch us and learn and ask questions. And usually, obviously, most times upcoming illustrators, designers, friends. And this kid, Earl Klasky, was a linoleum cut artist. He would take blocks of linoleum and cut with these tools into it. It was amazing. And his sister, Arlene Klatsky, and her husband, Gabor Chupo, were into television production, and they were responsible for the original bumper spots on the Tracy Ullman show for The Simpsons.
oh, well, and I think the Rugrats too. I
And
think they
and
were
Arlene,
involved
well,
in.
what happened was they moved all the animation to Poland because they could get it done a lot cheaper, and they were kind of hung out to dry because they had not only done the initial stuff, bumper stuff on Tracy Ullman's show, that when it got over to getting its own show, they were involved in that. They were our neighbors across the street on Orange Street,
Well,
and we would go over there and visit, and they had a animation stand in their front room, and they were doing all this animation for The Simpsons on Tracy Ullman. Then they opened up their own facility over on, I think it's on La Brea and near Sunset. And it's like next to the Little Red Schoolhouse. And they, again, you're right. They when they moved the animation, they lost. That was their biggest piece of business. And it's a great illustration of not putting all your eggs in one basket. That's why we at Pacific Ioneer stayed so diverse. I mean, you would really be hard pressed to name an industry that I haven't done work in. And so Earl was hanging out and he was doing these linoleum cuts, and we were teaching him how to do production. And he later went on to become an art director at ABC Records, but that's a whole nother story. And so I had him do this linoleum cut of the lettering. I did this lettering and quickly, and then he cut it into linoleum. And so we used that brown paper bag wrapping, very humble, very understated. I didn't want it to be colorful and just busy. I wanted it because his music is that. His music, this kind of sets you up for his music, and his music is just amazing. This album, if you're into gospel at all, and even if you're not, you can get down with this album. I mean, and his singing and his arrangements and his music, his songs, amazing, just incredible. And I'm glad you liked the opportunity of actually doing it.
I
you know.
do. And I love what you've done there. And, that delivers, that stands out a great deal.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like that, Ernie.
Let me get out of the way. Yeah,
I was amazed on this album because I started to do my research, and so many fine singers and musicians were
yeah,
also involved. Gloria Jones.
yes,
Gloria did the original Tainted Love. She has a fabulous voice.
yeah,
Jason Shefstad, Jerry played bass on there, and James Burton. When it
yes.
comes to guitar, you cannot get
You
any
cannot beat
better
him.
than
Oh yeah,
James Burton.
oh yeah,
The
oh yeah.
John Hurley's album, I had a chance to listen. I love a lot of the songs,
Were
and
you aware of
also
him before this?
as a songwriter, I heard his name, but I never, put the pieces together until you mentioned this album.
Right. Yeah. And I never had really heard of him because even though Jesus Christ Superstar was a big part of my career in the beginning, and it's 6 years later, and I'm pretty much surrounded by rock and roll. And one of the albums that we're going to be showing, oh, there's another album when we do the cutting room floor segment. There's an album that I did for Disney that was going to be a re-release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And it's amazing. It has all these different things and dimensions that pop out. It's probably as amazing as The Doors Full Circle, but that's another story. Anyway, you working with John was really a great experience. We pulled it off for Beverly. I mean, everybody really loved the album. John actually called me. He was with Beverly again, and he had seen it. He was, she had showed it to him. It was printed in New York. It wasn't a large issue. I mean, they didn't print hundreds and millions of them, and because it was gospel was a small segment, but growing, and you know, and they had success with Godspell, which was a really big album for them, and theatrical production, on the coattails of Jesus Christ Superstar. So again, talking about being in the right spot at the right time. You and I have talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
Time is everything. This album was incredibly in the right spot at the right time for me. So I was pretty stoked. And again, working with John was really quite an experience. So and now I think we should do a quick mind meld on this one and then go right
Oh,
to the next one.
let me see if we are on the same wavelength. I've got
Okay.
I've got two picks.
I've got two picks too.
Let me hear yours first.
Okay, the first one is One More Hallelujah, because I think that song kicks. I mean, it's just slamming. And then You Got the Right.
That
Yeah,
was mine. You Got the Right was my first choice.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
Getting It Free was another one.
yeah. Well, every song, this is one of those albums that you put on and you play it, and then you put it on again and play it. And by the third time you listen to it, you're just into it. I mean, it's one of those things that really draws you into it. And, this is, again, a year later, okay, along come my partner and I are coming. We were in San Francisco meeting with the Jefferson Airplane. We flew back and we come out of LAX, and there's all these Hare Krishna guys with the bongos and the music and chanting and giving people flowers and incense because they had an incense business. And, we, again, we didn't just snub them and walk by, but we were looking at and watching them as we were moving along, and we see this guy. This guy looks really familiar. And um, it turns out that one of the guys that was out there beating on the drums and chanting was a guy named Ken Sanders. Okay, Ken Sanders, go back a few years, and he was an engineer at a couple of times when we went into recording studios to meet with groups. And Ken was an upcoming young guy engineer, and we kind of hit it off with him because we spent time in the recording studio. And usually the producer is busy with one of the musicians or doing stuff out there in the Bay, and we're inside where he is, and we struck up a conversation again every time we got a chance to make a connection, because you never know where that guy's going to go. That guy could, I mean, they all started out somewhere. A good friend of mine, John Hartman, Phil Hartman's brother, once worked in a mailroom with David Geffen, and they were both coming up together at the same time. Geffen went on to be iconic. John managed America, and his brother was Phil Hartman. I mean, so you never know where they're going to end up, but it's always good to make friends. Nothing wrong with making friends, and especially if you have things in common. So um, after we met with well, what happened was we then now cut to years later, and we're meeting this Ken outside of LAX, and we, exchange, hey, well, let's get together. I mean, he had a shaved head, and he had the robes and the beads and all the rest of it, and we said, let's get together. We told him, that we had started a company on our own. He asked if we were still with Craig, and we know we had started our own company back in the day, and we did all these albums. And he said, "Oh, this is really great. I'd like to talk to you about an opportunity." So we gave him our card, and a few days later he shows up, right? And he's in all his robes and stuff with the shaved head, and he pulls up in a Rolls Royce. Okay, him and another guy that's got a briefcase, but he's got all the robes on it, and he's so obviously he's the lawyer or the business guy, and Ken is now the talent. What had happened was when we were in New York, Ken moved to Los Angeles. This was a year or so before we moved out to LA to open up Craig's satellite office. He had already gone. He wanted to, because the music world was now shifting to Los Angeles and the West Coast from the East Coast and the Midwest and everywhere else. It was all centering it was like Mecca for the music business, whether you were an act, a manager, a producer, a record company, it was where it was happening. That's where you needed to be. Plus, it was really good weather to be in and, easy to do business with. Everybody's kind of slowed down a bit. And so he had come out and we kind of lost track of him. And then the first time we saw him a couple years later is he's outside the Hare Krishna thing at the airport. So, he pulls up in this Rolls Royce, and it turns out that he's convinced he's now a producer, and he is convinced the higher ups in the Hare Krishna headquarters there that they it was a perfect time with George Harrison moving over to that Eastern music,
Yeah.
and sitars and stuff. And it was perfect. It was a sweet spot for these guys. And they wanted to recruit young people. And if you remember the time, young people were very open to cults and all kinds of stuff. I can't remember the husband and wife's name, but they had a bus that would go up and down Hollywood Boulevard at night, picking up people and taking them up to their religious place. It turned out to be a cult, and it was very shaky, but anyway, everybody was hustling. And he convinced them that the best way to reach these people is to do an album, music. George Harrison used all these, Ravi Shankar used all these images and personalities that young people were discovering and getting into. And why? Because of the Beatles. The Beatles were really influential in that direction. When they met with the Dalai Lama and all that stuff, I mean, and then the psychedelic part of it all, I mean, it was really, really talking. Music was, once again, a reflection of what was going on in the world and certainly in the United States and in the music business. So he had convinced them that. So they built a state-of-the-art recording studio. They owned this big piece of property down in the like lower part of on the other side of Wilshire in LA in an industrial part. They had bought this building, and they also set up a incense company called Spiritual Sky.
Yeah.
That we did a lot of really great stuff, and I think we talked to a show about
Sure
some.
did.
Yeah, yeah, and so we formed a really through Ken, we formed a great relationship with these guys. They loved the work they were doing, and we were doing. And I think the thing that was the key influencer for them, aside from Ken and really giving us a, two thumbs up, was the fact that we were doing work for some of the major acts in the business. So not only did Ken know how to reach that younger audience with what he created in the studio, we knew how to create that emotional connection between the music and the fan, the music and the young kid that they're trying to recruit. And not in an evil way. I mean, it didn't seem like, and I think, getting to know them, getting to understand that they understood that it was a business. Okay, it was a religious, but it was a religion, but it was a business. And I believe to this day, does God exist? Yes, he does. He exists right here in our heart and in our heads and what we have for each other. That's where he exists. So doing these kinds of things, and this album became like that. It became like it was part of what we were all about. We were trying to compete in an industry that's really jaded, and we're trying to play by the rules, and the rules keep changing, and we can either change with it or fight an upstream battle. And we never really compromised that about. And I got to give my partner Tony and I that we always kept that same love for what we did and the respect for what we did. And again, a couple times when we had opportunities to give back kickbacks to people that would give us work. A couple of creative directors and record companies, smaller labels that had the ability, one big label, but we never could realize. We talked about it, and it just, yeah, the money's there, and but what is the downside if you get caught?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it could really be bad. I mean, people go to jail, and that's another story that we'll talk about at some point with a couple of clients that I had. But we never really, I mean, it came down to why should we pay somebody to use us? I mean, why should we give back that? I mean, we deliver more. If you look at our work, it was more about the art than getting the money. We could have got the money, but you have a choice. It's like life. You can either go this way or you can go that way. Whether you try and walk down that middle line, it eventually ends and goes this way. There's no way of getting around it. That's what life does. That's one of the amazing things about life. And it's a constant choosing. What are you going to be? And not that I'm, super, honest and all that stuff. I mean, we all have little secrets that we keep, but I try to do the right thing, and especially when it came to the art, my art, and the business that we were in, and building a company. Pacific Pioneer was built on those cornerstones, and bringing more value than that's there, and that is expected, is really one of our mantras that we did, and it reflects in everything you did. This album is a perfect example of that. This album was called A Change of Heart. So subliminally, it's really saying to people, hey, don't be afraid of us. Get to know us. Put us in your heart. Let us win your heart. And it's funny because, for years, politicians are talking about winning hearts and minds. We were winning hearts and minds with this album in 1977,
Oh,
before they
wow.
even talked about winning hearts and minds. And we wanted to convey that change in the illustration that Bill Garland did. This most amazing illustration that Bill Garland did. And let me see, I think I've got it here. You can see what it is it's a caterpillar at the moment he becomes a butterfly. So it's that transformation of who you are to something greater than yourself. And so look back at this, and you see, and he's on this vine, that he's at the top of the vine, and he's got all these hands with watches. He's got this watch in his hand. I mean, it's a beautiful illustration, absolutely beautiful. And so and you can, when you look all the way down, and I tried to show it in this one, you can look all the way down over here and you see the little buildings and stuff that are down there on the ground. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. You can see the perspective, and it's done in an Arthur Rackham style. Arthur Rackham was a very famous English illustrator that did children's books. And Bill even signed his name down here in the corner. Let's see, right here, in that, like Arthur Rackham would sign his. I mean, this was like Drew Struzan doing a Rockwell or J.C. Leyendecker style. Bill Garland had the ability to do that too. He could do Disney. He did the inside of Alice Cooper's greatest hits. He learned. I talked about this before. Pacific Pioneer was a learning place. It was like getting college education beyond. It was like getting your master's, okay, or your doctorate, because now you're not in under the umbrella of a protective institution. You're out there on your own and you're naked, and you got to really start building it or perish. It really gets down to that. And I mean, I was 26 years old. I had $2,500. My partners, other two partners had $25. We all 2,500, and we put that in, and that's how we started Pacific Pioneer. Thank God for Ivy Hill. We've talked about them before. They were like a guardian angel for us as well, because they realized the value we could bring to them. And it helped us understand the value that we offered. And like I said, my partner Tony was a genius. I mean, he graduated college at 16. He was good looking. I mean, he was just, he had all of it. And he was, just a great, we became like brothers, and he was an incredible salesman. People loved him. And that's, I mean, people loved him the same way an actor and actress camera would love them. People loved Tony. He had a great personality. He was really wonderful. After, 14 and a half years, it's a shame that it ended that way, but it did. And, it is what it is. But back to this album, I wanted to do some really nice lettering, and we wanted to sort of, again, bring more importance to the message that we were saying that was backed up by the name of the album. So we put it off center. We did this. I mean, that illustration could have been the whole front cover,
I
but
agree. It's
but
beautiful.
but you wouldn't have gotten the depth. And when I send you these files, you'll see. I mean, it's just, I mean, and the illustration's big. It's probably 20 by 30. It's a big illustration. It's done in watercolor. And again, the other thing about Drew and Bill and Carl Ramsey and Joe Garnett and these guys, they weren't stuck to a style. Most illustrators develop a style, and that's all they do. Peter Max. You can look at a Peter Max then, and later you knew it was Peter Max because he had that style. He never, and then when he tried to break away from that and get into oil painting and stuff, it was not good. So I mean, and again, that goes back to having your moment in the sun. And it's hard to hold on to that moment. It's hard to show up every day. But some of us can do it and some of us can't. Been, again, very blessed that I've been able to do that. I've been able to show up for the last 78 years every morning to get that beam of light that makes my day and makes me realize that what I do is still relevant. It is still important. The back cover illustration is now the evolution from the caterpillar to the butterfly. So he's now the butterfly. And this illustration was done by Carl Ramsey. We did that a lot. We put illustrators together. We put Drew and Bill together. We put Carl and Drew together. We put Drew together with Joe Patagno. And it's so funny because I never really thought about how the role that I played, not only from a creative standpoint, but from lettering, creative direction. It's like if we write a song together, everybody gets paid. But I never, and not, my ego never made me do that. It always looked at what value these guys brought, these incredible illustrators that I had a chance to come up with. And Joyce, it was amazing. It was a magical time, an incredibly magical time for me. And I sort of did a blow up here, and you could see the clocks in his hand, and time is running out. He's ready to change. I mean, honest to God, I get my hair on my arms are standing up when I
Oh
think
my
about
gosh. Oh,
the
yeah,
power.
hate to tell you this. I know time is running out for us
Okay.
as well
Okay.
too,
So we
but
need we need we
I want
need
to
we talked about Change of Heart and World Beyond the Sky. Those would be the two songs.
and they're nice songs. And did you ever meet Michael Cassidy, who was the singer, in that particular golden avatar behind
Right.
the
I
group?
did. I did. Because
Oh,
they had Saturday events where they had feasts for everybody. And that was also part of the recruiting into what they're doing. That was where they were making incense. They had people making incense all day. It was amazing. And we became part of that family. We'd go to these Saturday feasts. Everything was dairy, but it was really good. And we got to meet a lot of these musicians and stuff because they were all there. That's where they lived. They all lived there. They worked there. It was self-contained bubble that they all existed in. And it made it very inviting It was, I mean, the fact that they were, when you'd come up to the feast and everybody was really, let's see, we have less than a minute. It was an amazing experience. And I'm going to send you these images. God bless you. Thank you, Joyce. I love you.
I love you too, Ernie. Thank you. This was just a wonderful story and beautiful designs. Really do appreciate you very much. It's
Thank you.
Ernie's Corner on the Block Party.